Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
All right, welcome back to Faith Talk, the podcast where we talk about all things at the intersection of faith and real life. And tonight, special guest on here tonight is going to come and share in another installation of our Share Your Journey, Tell Your Story installation or series of podcasts we do here on the show. So I've invited this brother to come and share his story, a person that I've known for a number of years. He and I have been really close for many years. Definitely he has a story, I think, that he can share. Also, we're going to ask him to share his perspectives on some other things as relates to life, ministry, politics, and so forth and so on. So tonight I present to y'all my friend and brother, Reverend Dr. Andrell Spikes. Again, dear friend of mine, dear brother. So I'm just going to get out of the way now. Just ask him to come, just share a little bit about who he is, introduce himself to the audience. Dr. Spikes.
So I grew up right there in the Vonado community of Louisiana, a little small area that we consider as Fostertown. Single mama household. I have 7 other siblings, 2 sisters, and 5 brothers. And so we just lived right there in the Fostertown community and, grew up right across the field from you, Dr. Robinson. And so that is my introduction of who I am and my roots going back to my childhood.
Yeah. You grew up in a mansion, you grew up a whole lot of money in the neighborhood we was in, were we rich? What was that? What do you remember about our early roots?
Oh my God, growing right there up in Fostertown, it was very enriching. We was a close-knit area, right? Most of all of us was kin. We had the elder people in that area, your dad, auntie that we call Granny Bert, cousin Charles Ray, Helen, my mom, Juanita, and it was just a loving community. And when you look back over and you just see how it was back then versus the way it is now, a lot of people, because of floods, have migrated out of the Fostertown area to different parts of Vonado to escape the flood, because Fostertown was a flood area at that still is, and so we just try to make it. I go home every Sunday to visit my mom, make sure she's all right, and just to go back to the community and see how it just became a mass exodus of people. My mom and your stepmom, Miss Nancy, are the only 2 that's right there from the area that we grew up in that still reside there today.
You find a lot of times people came up situations like ours. We still have rich culture and unity. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Rich culture and community. Yeah, learn certain values, certain principles, certain structures, certain levels of respect, certain things that we learn because we grew up in the kinds of environments and communities that we grew up in. So can you kind of share some of the things that you learned, just being in the community that we were in, even some of those people who contributed to instilling certain principles and certain values in us, even I'm 50 years old, we're right there together. And it's weird to some people that we still say, yes, sir, no, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And, we are grown men. Nonetheless, these kinds of values and things are instilled. So, do you think that has anything, the way we grew up, does that have anything to do with shaping us or some of the people in that community? They play a role in helping us to become who we are as men. Can you think of anybody?
At that time of us growing right up right there in Fostertown, and then, in the Vonado community, we had to say yes, ma'am, yes, sir. And, growing up in those days, if a grown person told us to do something, we had to do it. Because if we did not, you know, they had, they could have disciplined us. And then when we got home, we got disciplined again. So when you talking about from one area of Fostertown Road to the other area of Fostertown Road, you had Miss Savannah Hatchett, you had you had Levi Lewis, you had Catherine Lewis, you had Junior Peters, you had Miss Lily and Miss Juanita, Mr. Lawrence, and then you had Mr. Robert, Miss Louise. I'm just naming the people that played a significant role in creating who we are today. And then on the other end, you know, you had Mr. James Hooks, you had your Uncle Shelton Robinson, Miss Honora Robinson, you had Miss Lindors and Mr. Really Ray, and you had all of those people playing a significant role in who we are today. And they demanded respect. We had to respect those persons at that time. And even today, like you said, we in office, but there's no way am I going to call Louise Smith, Louise Smith. I'm going to say Miss Smith. It's Louise because that's the way that we brought up. That's the way that we were brought up. And then, you know, you had right there in the community, I don't want to leave him out. Elder Fields, he was like the spiritual leader of the community. We looked to him in terms of this religious awakening that we had in that community as children, because he was the only preacher, as I can recall, that lived on the Fostertown Road.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, we had him, Uncle Shep, preacher at,
That's
Shep
right.
at Boothstown.
You had Reverend Shep and Elder Fields that lived right there as being preachers in that community. So you're right.
I thank you for taking us down memory lane because we walked them roads many days. And, you know, as a community, everybody was just connected. We just all shared, you know, looked out for each other, played out in the yard, worked in the yard with each other, helped each other, do chores. Everybody could just discipline, you know, just a great time. So I want you to, so that's the early formation of your life. You spent in Fostertown, graduated high school. I already know the year. Tell the folk what year you came back.
Well, you know, graduated high school in 1992 from Vonador High School. And, you know, even with going to high school, we had to respect, you know, our teachers all the way from elementary school to junior high school to high school. We had to respect our teachers. In this day and time, you know, both of us being educators, this day and time, you go to school, kids might say no, yes, they might curse right there in front of your face, and you know you're hesitant to say anything to the kids because you don't know what the parents are gonna say, and then you don't know what your principal is going to say. If your principal is not a disciplinarian, you don't know what the principal is going to say, and so you got to be very careful of that.
So, you know, even knowing your personal journey. So, you know, after high school, you went on into military. So, during the military, what were some of your experiences that you had? And were you able to, now when you do it in retrospect, can you see God's hand in that particular leg of your journey when you were in the military?
So I joined the military and I went to boot camp in San Diego, California in March of 1993. That was my first time away from home. I was ready to get away from Juanita's house. That was my first time away from home. And after boot camp and AT school, I was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan on board the USS Independence CV-62 for my tour duty. And it was a great experience because I was able to meet people from all over the world. I was able to, get the urban perspective, get the suburban perspective, get the rural perspective, what we were brought up in. And it was in the military, on board the aircraft carrier I was stationed, that I can really say that I found God, that I found God. My mom raised me in the church right there at Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church under the leadership of Dr. Alfonso Nelson. But as an adult, that's where I found God. And that's where I started crafting my theology of who I thought God was in the world and in my life. And I remember um, I had a good friend, and he's still my good friend today. His name is Charles Dunham. He lived in Baltimore, Maryland. And he was a devout Christian. The brother can sing, Dr. Robinson. And we would be at the workstations on board the aircraft carrier, and he would just burst out in song and just start singing gospel songs. And I would just listen. I'd be like, "You grew up in church. I grew up in church too." And then at that time, I remember, studiously studying my Bible, reading my Bible. I remember going to my workstations, preaching the gospel in my workstation to myself. And I wasn't called to preach, but I would just like sometimes get in my workstation. I was still young, and I would just try to mimic Dr. Alfonso Nelson how he would preach sometimes, and I would just preach the gospel right there. And sometimes I would just speak, and my good friend Charles Dunham, he would just start singing. And we would just have church right there in our workstation. And I remember one time my senior chief, his name was Senior Chief Cruz. He was making his rounds in the workstation, and he heard me preaching and Charles singing, and he was like, "What in the world y'all got going on in here?" He said, "Y'all supposed to be working, and y'all sitting up here having church." And I was like, "Oh my God, he gonna write us up. We're gonna get in trouble." And he never did. He never did write us up. And then later on, he came to Charles and I, and he said, "It's good to see young men believing in God." And that was such an inspiration for me at that time. And then I had a lieutenant commander. He was a chaplain in the Navy, and he was stationed on base. We were stationed on the aircraft carrier. And every Sunday we would go to church and just listen to him when we was in port, and just listen to him just give us the word and just teach us the word. And then out at sea, I had another good friend. He was AZ. He was an AZ-1. When I first went in the military, I was non-designated. I worked for ABF Fuels. Then I took the test and I went over to AZ, but he was a part of the squadron. And when we went out at sea, we had church right there in the chapel area. And that brother, when you talking about a brother who knew the word, and we all know Reverend, help me out, right there in Angie, who knows the word real good, blind, Peters. He knew the word just like Reverend Peters knows the word today. He can quote scriptures from Genesis to Revelation. And that brother, he just really helped keep me rooted and grounded when I was in the military. And all the other people, such as Charles, the lieutenant commander, and that brother, really kept me rooted and grounded. And then I had another friend. His name is Casey Bruce. He lives in Oklahoma now. And he was a part of our clique that we really stuck together and made sure that we held one another accountable. And that made me stay rooted and not just venture off and start doing things that I know that the community that I was raised in would not be pleased, and I know that my mom would not be pleased. And so it was just a wonderful time on board the USS Independence and my development of my Christian faith.
Yeah, I think that's so true. A lot of us who went to the military, even though we were reared in church and all that good stuff, made, raised up in church. I think we started to have some of those real lived experiences with God in the military. And that's true of because a lot of people I've met, you talk about how their earliest real, you know, their real spiritual formation began to happen. It was in the military. I don't know what the correlation is. Even mine, I tell people all the time, when I really found out God was real, it was in boot camp.
Yes.
That was the first time I had to call on God and ask him to help me get through every single day, and I would see God do things. I would feel God. When I left boot camp, I was like, I know now that God is real. Before I just had a religious, I guess, my grandparents and parents, they did what they knew to do, which was make us go to church. But I can tell you, kind of like Paul on the road to Damascus, I was doing what I knew to do until I had an actual encounter with Jesus.
Yes.
All the difference in the world. Yeah, that made all the difference in the world. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And so, from the military, you did your time in the service, you came out of the service, and your story didn't stop there. What was the next phase of doing life here?
So when I got out of the military, just like all of us, I needed a job. By that time, when I got out of the military, I had a family. I was married to my wife. She had a child. She was pregnant with our child. And so I had to go to work. And so at that time, that's when I went into law enforcement and started working in law enforcement for a period of time. And so I did law enforcement for about 7 years. And then that's when, in 2004, after about 7 years, that's when I started my matriculation at Miles College. And as I always tell a lot of people, you know, if it wasn't for Earl Robinson having me to make a crazy decision of my life in 2004, in May of 2004, you and I talking on the phone, and you were like, why don't you just, Blue, why don't you just go to school? And I'm like, how am I going to go to school and make it? And so at this time I was divorced. I was still working in law enforcement. I was working for Alabama Department of Corrections, and you just convinced me, and I did it. And I just started school in August of 2004. And so that's what I did after I got out of the military, worked in law enforcement, and then in August of 2004, started my matriculation at Miles College.
Right. Did you stop at Miles? Did some other things happen? College of ministry and theological.
I did not stop at Miles. My journey in education continued. And while at Miles, that's when I accepted my call into the ministry. I was attending West End Hill Missionary Baptist Church under the leadership of Pastor Dennis Brown in Birmingham, Alabama. And that's where I got my license in the Baptist church in 2006. And so I wanted to get to know who God was, more so from a theological perspective, right? And having the ability to access, information from different people who have studied theology, were in the ministry, who were in the ministry and everything. And so when I graduated from Miles College in 2008, I decided that I was gonna go to the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, Georgia. The chaplain at Miles College, his name is Larry Beatty. Reverend Larry Beatty, he was very hands-on with the student ministers on campus, instilled in us the value of getting theological education. And he was a graduate of the Interdenominational Theological Center, Phillips, I think, Phillips School of Theology, right there in Atlanta, Georgia. And he told us, and it didn't matter if you were Baptist, if you was United Methodist, if you was Kojic, if you was AME, CME, he just wanted us to go to school to get our education. And I went to ITC, Morehouse School of Religion. I got my master's divinity from ITC. I graduated in 2012 with my master's of divinity, but it still was not enough. It seemed like that I was just going just to have the degree behind my name, so I can say that I have this theological training. But when I had graduated, I still wanted more. I still had a thirst to learn more about theology and about ministry. And so I moved to Evanston, Illinois, right outside of Chicago, on the north side of Chicago. I moved to Evanston, Illinois. At this time, I was married again to my wife, LaRonda Spikes. Her and I was married, and she was very supportive in my ministry. And so I moved to Evanston, and I attended Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary to get more training in ministry, in theology. And so I studied in the Master's of Theological Studies program. And so that was a 3-year program. And during that program, that's when I moved back to Louisiana and started my extension education. And I thought, Dr. Robinson, that my extension education was finished because I'm like, okay, I'd have had my bachelor's degree, I'd have had my master's divinity degree, I studied with my master's of theological studies degree, and I was like, I thought I was gonna have everything complete. I was finished, but I continued my education, and I went to Asbury Theological Seminary in August of 2017. And by this time, I was in the United Methodist Church. And Dr. Terrence August, he brought me in under his tutelage, really helped me know what the United Methodist Church was all about. And then you had people like Levi Lewis, Freddie Jefferson. You had the Angels Charge, Mary's Chapel, Live Vote, and Restoration that really paid into my ministry. And I would never forget the support, the ministerial support, the financial support that they gave me when I started school again in August of 2017 to get my Master's of Arts in Ministry. And they supported me all the way until I completed my master's program in 2019. They supported me. And then I thought I was finished again. I thought I was finished again. And I said, after I got that degree, I had told my wife at that time, LaRonda, I said, I'm finished. I said, I'm done. I'm finished. And then Dr. Milton Lowe of Asbury Theological Seminary, the Doctor of Ministry program, he had called my phone in 2019. He called my phone and he said, I had just graduated from my master's program, right? And so he called my phone like in June, and he called my phone right after I graduated, and he said, Andrea Spikes, he said, I was looking at your grades and everything, and he said, I think you would be a good candidate for the Doctor of Ministry program. I said, at this time is 2019. I had been in school at that time ever since 2004. I was burnt out. I didn't want to be in school anymore. It was 15 years that I had been in school. And so I had just quit. And then I said, nope. I said, I don't want to go to school anymore. And so I thought I was done with it. I was teaching at that time, and my wife and I at that time, we were just living our life and just enjoying ourselves. And 2020 happened, COVID happened. And, as we know, the world was shocked to its knees. The international community um, was just shocked to its knees because of the COVID pandemic. But in in April of 2020, while COVID was going on, Dr. Milton Lowe, he called my phone again, and he said, Andy, that's what they call me doing school. He said, Andy, he said, I'm calling you again, seeing if you want to be part of the doctorate of ministry program. And I said, you know what? I said, I go ahead and I enrolled. I said, what do I have to do? And he said, well, you graduated with us. We already have all your transcripts from your previous schools. We already have everything we need. He said, only thing we need you to do is do the application. And he said, then you can choose whatever cohort that you wanted to be in. And so I chose the organizational leadership cohort of the Doctorate of Ministry program to be in. And in June of 2020, I started that degree. And you know how hard it is to get your doctorate degree. And I worked hard for 4 years, and many times, I wanted to give up. During that time, I went through a divorce. During that time, I had some personal challenges that I had to deal with. I kept going because I wanted to um, finish my education with a doctorate degree because I had been in school for so long. So I was like, let me finish my education with a doctorate degree. And so this past May 2024, at this time, after 19 years of schooling, I obtained my doctorate of ministry degree.
Okay. Yeah. The reason I wanted you to share that is because, the fact that you stayed the course and chose to do all that you did, it took you almost a span of 20 years to accomplish it, but you set out on that path to get it done, and you got it done. And, to me, that has always spoken to your resilience, your determination to get it done. And, it wasn't that you had to do it, but it was, it's kind of a passion for you to see that vision come past. And you actually, stayed the course, as a non-traditional student. You started school, you and I both are like in those ways. We non-traditional students in the sense of, want to start undergrads later on and then continue to, matriculate.
And so that's a meaningful point that you mentioned too, right? Because when I started at Miles, like you said, I was a non-traditional student. When I started at Miles, I was 29 years old. I was going to school with 18, 19, 20, 21, year old young people. At this time, I had went to the military. I had a family and everything. And now I'm in school at the age of 29, non-traditional student. My mind had already been developed more so of the experience of the world, of the experience of life. But in the experience in terms of education, my mind was not there. And I can say that I leaned on a whole lot of traditional students to help me throughout my matriculation, especially the first half of my matriculation at Miles. because I wasn't, even though I had been to the military, I wasn't as knowledgeable when it came down to computers and everything. So they helped me along the way, and I was able to get different perspectives perspectives from them about how they see the world in the modern day time. And so it was very hard being a non-traditional student, getting your degree. And then, every step of my way, it was like I was a non-traditional student. By the time I went to my master's program, a lot of people, would have already completed their master's program and everything. So it was an experience and it was a shock. But I thank God. And, like I tell people, I'm not just saying this with you being on the phone, but if it was not for you, um, convincing me, putting um, it in the atmosphere, for me to just quit work and go to school, I would not have obtained the knowledge that I have now. And, all my degrees except for my bachelor's degree is in the church, is in ministry, is in theology. So that's what I know. That's what I'm confident in. And so when you come down to this journey of the church, I'm a very conservative person when it comes down to the church. I believe in the social norms, in the cultural norms of the church. And I don't think that those norms should be infringed upon if they are not guided by God. When I wrote my dissertation is on tradition, doctrine, and politics. Those are the areas of my expertise that I focus on when it comes down to the church and ministry.
You're well versed when it comes to your theological training. You've also had some opportunities to do some teaching, kind of share uh, uh, your training in certain Bible colleges and institutions of that nature. Am I correct?
So I have taught in Bible colleges. I have taught theology in Bible college. And those experiences highlighting, right? When you began to get into the root of theology and the doctrine that surrounds ministry, the church, and the Bible, it becomes so fascinating. And I know a lot of my students, they always say, we just cannot put up with your thinking. Your thinking is so outside of the box. And I tell them my thinking is not outside of the box, but my thinking is to challenge you upon your ministry so you can know who God is. Sometimes we relate God and we put God in the box, right? And we put God into the 66 books of the Bible. But God continues to speak in the postmodern era to contemporary theologians such as your, yourself and I. And God continued to share his purpose in this era with people yet to be born who will begin to change the way that the church operate and the way that people see the Bible today. And so once you begin to get into teaching at a Bible college and stuff like that, it is fascinating because now I'm sharing my studies in theology with students who still in search of who God is. Someone asked me the question one time, especially when I first started my ministry and started to go to ITC, they asked me about my ministry. They said, when did God call you? And I said, I don't know when God called me. I said, God could have been speaking to me for a long time, but I chose not to listen to his voice. And so I'm trying to tell my students now, study, read the Bible, read the commentaries, read other writings that surround this biblical theological notion of who God is, and get your perch in your religious formation so you can know what area that you really want to be trained. And like I said, for me, my areas, I love the tradition, the doctrine, and the politics of the church. And I try my best to study different denominations um, so I can be very well versed when I'm talking to people such as yourself in the AME church, or I'm talking to some of my friends in the Presbyterian or the Kojic or the CME church. But if we just put God inside of a box, then we will never get to appreciate who God is and how God is speaking in this day and time. Because it's very crucial for you to know and to be unapologetic in your and I don't want to get too into your hermeneutical interpretation of who God is, right? Because once you begin to interpret who God is, people are gonna always challenge you or try to challenge you on your stance of who God is. And God is not to be argued. God is not to be debated. God's self stand alone. And I have had a whole lot of professors throughout my education process who have really poured in to my thinking. When I think about Dr. Riggins Earl, when I think about Dr. Lisa Allen, when I think about Dr. Henry Welcher, he was a church historian. He knew how the church operated, Dr. Robinson, and he was strong on that. He was a CME preacher, and he was strong on that. When I think about Dr. Jacqueline Grant, one of the founders of womanist theology, when I think about those people, and then when I think about Dr. Larry Murphy, those people educated themselves just to educate us and to pour into us this theological foundation with years and years of experience and allow you to see God in this special way. I have a book in my library called The Creative Encounter from Howard Thurman. And Howard Thurman emphasizes this encounter that we have with God and this encounter that we have with people. And that if we begin to see people outside of that encounter, we fail to have this relationship with God. Because I learn from you and you learn from me. And so if I would tell your viewers, if they ever have a chance, Howard Thurman, an awesome writer who really write about this relationship with Jesus. You know, he wrote Jesus and the Disinherited. And then when you talk about the great theologian, the great who wrote the cross and the lynching, the cross and the lynching tree, he is the Black liberation theologian, and his emphasis on who God is to the Black people. That is a must read. And then, like I said, Dr. Larry Murphy, his thing about God and technology, his thing about God and the Black experience, those people really helped shape my theological framework. And so I try to put that same emphasis into my students when I'm teaching at the Bible colleges to let them know that, hey, this is how God is working, not only through our traditional means, But God is working through technology. God is working through these cultural, this social, this economic experiences that we are having in the world.
I love how you spent some time talking about your theological teaching experiences, books, professors, and institutions that have helped to shape your theology, your perspectives, your faith development, your spiritual, all that good stuff. Um, but I want you to now talk about your theological views, constructs. But now let's talk about your political, because what those of us who know that you share a political perspective that's counter to what most people in our communities and cultures share. And I can say, as a personal friend, that I have always appreciated the fact that you have your perspective and you stand on what you believe. And we've always just had a kind of relationship where we just agree to disagree, because we know everybody's entitled to their own perspectives, and at the same time respect one another's perspective. So, do you care to share? What some of your political perspectives are, and perhaps maybe talk about, I think, matter of fact, I may just ask, kind of get your perspectives on some of the current stuff that we're seeing, and kind of hear your point of view as a person from your perspective. So, you mind sharing any of that tonight?
So I get a lot of a lot of backlash concerning my political views, concerning my political affiliation. As in my religious affiliation, I'm very conservative. In my political affiliation, I am a conservative. My knowledge of politics really started when I was in the military, and um, I did not embrace the views of Bill Clinton. I didn't embrace his military views. And then once I started to look at him in terms of his social policies, I didn't embrace those social policies that he that he emphasized, um, such as the welfare to work program. You had a welfare to work program where you had these single women working in different agencies for different companies, and especially within the federal government. And those women was working for the federal government, like for the or for the state government, such as the unemployment office or whatever federal government agency it was. Those women would work in those agencies just for about $135 for a month, in order to stay on welfare. Now these companies would not hire the women. They let the women work for them as a receptionist or whatever, so they can get welfare for that month. And so when you began to talk about the economic success of the Clinton administration, the economic success of the Clinton administration really came off the backs of single women who had to work for $135 a month. And many African Americans today, they go back to that time and they find that difference, that separation with them with the Clinton administration. And then you had within the Clinton administration the three strikes you outlaw. People going to prison or getting convicted 3 times, and then after their third conviction, they get life in prison. And this life imprisonment was targeted at drug dealers. You talking about non-violent crimes. And these people are getting life imprisonment. And so I did not subscribe to that political ideology. And so that began to move me, well, that helped shape me in my conservatism. I knew even before I started college, I had a passion for politics, especially when I went to the military. And you know, a lot of people, even in my family, they say, how are you a conservative? How are you a Republican? And you come right here from Vornado, your mom and your family are Democrats. And I'm like, just because my mom, my dad, or whomever are Democrats, it doesn't make me subscribe to their political ideology. That was good for them at that time. And then when George W. Bush came on the scene, and when he started running for the presidency in 19 um uh I want to make sure I get it right. In 1999, when he started running for the presidency of the United States, I really started to pay careful attention to who he was. I knew who he was for being governor of Texas, because he began to be one of the highlights within the Republican Party, and his name was always being mentioned as a potential president of the United States. And then when he started running, and then he started bringing in people like Condoleezza Rice, when he started bringing in people like Colin Powell, when he started to bring in a lot of other people, and you started to look at or listen to their political mindset, and I'm just naming two African American Republicans at that time. We know that Colin Powell, during the campaign and the general election of Barack Obama, we know that he switched from being a Republican and he voted for Barack Obama. The presidency of George Bush and this thing of neoconservatism, that really caught my eye. And I really started to study uh, politics at that time, because I didn't want no one to just say, well, he just being a Republican because whatever, he don't know what in the world he's talking about. But I try my best to be a student of my party, to be a student of the Republican Party. And I understand that, people within the African American community does not, do not subscribe to my political ideology. That's fine. Everybody have a way that they see the world. And so I see the world from a conservative standpoint, and uh, uh, I'm a conservative, and that's the way my mindset.
Yeah, yeah. We got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to ask you a few questions about the current. Let's fast forward. George Bush, W. Bush, 2000, 2008. We passed Barack Obama, 2008, 2012. In comes the new frontman for the Republican Party. So we don't even skip that and go to his current term. This is his 2025 inauguration and where we are now. So with the current climate and being a Republican, are you just Republican, or do you kind of ascribe to the new kind of Republican ideology, which more of a for lack of a better way of saying it, more of a Trump party than a Republican party? So what are your thoughts as it relates to Trump and kind of some of the current things going on now with, with what's going on now? With all the stuff, DEI and Department of Government Efficiency, the layoffs and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So kind of what's your thoughts on that, being that you're a part of this political movement?
So for some reason, people think, because when people in this modern day era say that we are a Republican, People think that we subscribe to the mega movement, but many people were Republicans before Donald Trump even came on the scene. And if you can, just let me go back once. Just let me go back for a moment. Before Donald Trump came on the political scene, he was a Democrat. And so he paid into Bill Clinton campaign. He supported people like Schumer. So before he ran against Hillary, he supported Bill. They went to each other's. He went to Chelsea's, Hillary and Bill's daughter's wedding. So he was a friend of theirs. But when he came on the scene, he came on the scene as a Republican. And it's so fascinating how the same people that was getting money from him are now the same people who want to call him an out-of-touch billionaire. But just the billionaire that you allowed to give you money. And so it's amazing how people change their mind about things. And in this day and time, in this climate, many people who were Republicans before Donald Trump came on the scene. Now, Donald Trump came on the scene with this mega movement, with this populist agenda. And when he came on the scene with this mega movement, with this populist agenda, even some traditional Republicans said, well, I can't stand what this man is standing for. You have people like Lindsey Graham, who is a staunch ally today. But when Donald Trump first came on the scene, just like myself, I was more for Jeb Bush to win, not for Donald Trump to win. Lindsey Graham, who's a staunch Trump ally, he did not vote for Donald Trump in his first election. And so we get a severe backlash saying that we are all for this Trump agenda. And what we are for the conservative policies that Trump is initiating, that Trump is proposing to this world. Now, I love the fact, and I have heard many Democrats over my lifetime promote the America First agenda. Many African Americans, Democrats say, why are we getting involved in these wars in the Middle East? Why are we getting involved in these wars across the world? They chastise President Bush for getting us in the wars that he got us in Iraq and in Afghanistan, where numerous soldiers' lives were lost. But Trump comes in with this America First agenda, and the ones who once criticized George W. Bush for getting us into the wars, they criticize Trump for taking a pro-American stance and making sure that we don't get involved in the wars. And so that's very fascinating to see how people once demonized George W. Bush, but now George W. Bush become their champion now of a Republican man because he opposed Donald Trump. So anybody who opposed Donald Trump being in the Republican Party is a fan of the Democrats now. But once the Democrats demonized them the same way that they demonized Donald Trump, racist, a billionaire, for the wealthy. That's the same way they criticize Ronald Reagan. That's the same way they criticize George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, John McCain, Bob Dole, Mitt Romney. And guess what? After Trump, they're going to still criticize Republicans as being racist, for the rich, and everything. I'm a Republican. I'm not rich. I stand with the Republican Party because of conservative principles. I'm a supporter, and I voted for Donald Trump because of his America First agenda. And people say, well, he's going to take away Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And I always say, look what he did in his first term. And my thing is, how many times the man has to say that he would not take away Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, that he would not cut food stamps, or he would not try to do away with these social programs. And then the people still say that he would do it. Look for when he was president at first. And then they say, well, all thing he's going to do is get us into wars across the world. Look at his first term. No war. You didn't have a war in Iraq. You didn't have a war in Afghanistan. You didn't have a war between Russia and Ukraine. You didn't have a war between Israel and Hamas on the Gaza Strip in Palestine. You didn't have a war there. You didn't have a war against Iran. But they cried wolf so many times. And even during his first term, when he took out al-Baghdadi, when he took out General Soleimani, when he took out all of these people who were threatening the United States and the United States troops, people did not give him credit for. When he bombed Syria in his first term, people said, well, he's bringing us into war. We did not have war. But let me tell you this. Under George W. Bush, Russia invaded Georgia. Under Barack Obama, Russia invaded Ukraine, taking Crimea. Under Donald Trump, nothing happened. Under Joe Biden, Russia once again invade Ukraine, and we are still in war today. So the America First policy is getting America out of these conflicts. Now, Donald Trump rhetoric has to cease. And I think that he done toned it down in his second term than he was in his first term. But his rhetoric has to cease. He isolates more people than he brings people together. But that's not why we support him as a conservative. We support him as conservatives because of his conservative policies. And so you mentioned about DEI and the woke agenda. Listen, I am a proud African-American man. I am a proud African-American man. And so I always ask people, how did DEI come about? And it's amazing if you begin to talk to people about these things. Only thing they know, and some of them don't even know what DEI stands for: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Many people don't know what it stands for. They just know because Donald Trump was speaking out against it that they don't like it. But when you began to unravel, how did DEI come about? Well, the United States Supreme Court struck down affirmative action. And when the United States Supreme Court struck down affirmative action, that's when DEI came about. Because these schools could not hire anymore from a race, from a gender, sexual orientation background. Affirmative action was struck down, and so they put in DEI as a convert thing to affirmative action. Listen, we live in a country, and we understand how America got here. We understand that America participated in atrocities that we can never redeem, or it seems like we can never redeem ourselves from. We understand that slavery happened in the United States. We understand that women did not have rights at one time. We understand at one time African Americans, when they went to the polling places They had to count coins in a jar. They had to do all this unnecessary stuff in order to vote. We understand those things. But when are we going to ameliorate ourselves from those things and try to get along in this political religious atmosphere? Because we all say that we are Christians, and this is for my white conservatives, this is for my white Democrats, my black conservatives, my black Democrats. We must live in a society where Martin Luther King say, well, we are not being judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. And we know his rightful which call that I have a dream that one day my four little children will live in a nation where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. But I say that we must live in a society that we are not judging each other by the color of our skin, or by our sexual orientation, by our gender, by our wealth. But we are living in a society where we try to get along in this political atmosphere that is so detrimental to our way of life. And so, if someone, you know, I don't believe, I didn't believe in affirmative action. I don't believe in and I don't believe in the woke agenda. I believe that God made us all. So therefore, we should treat everybody with respect. It doesn't matter who we are, white, black, or male, female. It doesn't matter who we are. We should live in a world where we're promoting God's agenda even above our political ideology. And so that's where I am at with my political stance and with my thing with Donald Trump. If I can go further, I don't know how much time we have. If I can go further, listen to this. Say again.
Now, see, what I was going to do, because I know you're very passionate about your political ideologies and thoughts. So I think what we're gonna need to do is we're gonna make a part 2 to this, so I can give you space. We've already a good while in. We're an hour and 16 minutes in, and so.
Yes, sir. That sounds good to me.
I know this is your thing, but let me say this: I do appreciate what you have shared tonight on your journey. This is Faith and the Journey, and again, I ask you to start from the beginning, just kind of share it, because even though we ended with the political aspect of it, what I found so remarkable is that people could see the full formation of who you are and how you got to where you are. Versus, a lot of times people see you, they think they know you, they hear you, whatever. And this for any individual. But I think when you get to know people's story, you'll begin to appreciate who they are and what they bring to the table a lot more. The struggles and the triumphs and the fights and the resilience, tenacity, how we see people and we see them where they are today, but we don't know the story. We don't know what they went through to get where they are. We see people blessed and we talk about them, be mad at them, but we don't know the struggles that they had to get where they are. They fought to get to where they are. And we're showing up in the story, part of the story when they're blessed, without knowing that there was some time they didn't have, Tyler Perry, for instance. When I saw his documentary, it made me appreciate more of who Tyler Perry is, because I heard him talk about his early upbringing and all this kind of thing. So that's what I'm glad that you were able to do for us. But I know when you really get riled up is when you get to going on your political policies and your ideas. I'm gonna give you a whole nother segment for that. It's gonna be a whole nother segment, or maybe even 2 or 3 more, whatever it takes. All right. 'Cause I know there's some people out there that are really curious to hear your perspectives. All
Yes,
right.
sir.
Let me just thank you again for jumping on tonight. Appreciate it, man. Thank all of the Faith Talk people who will get a chance to listen to this podcast. Just ask that you hear his heart, hear his story, and appreciate who he is as a man of God, an academician, and current person that he is today. And until next time, Faith Talk, remember this is the place where we talk about all things at the intersection of faith and life. So until next time, God bless.
Audio Jungle.